Welcome, Dr. Dan Harrison. Dan is the founder and CEO of Harrison Assessments, the originator of Paradox technology used in Harrison Assessments. Dan has a diverse background in mathematics, personality theory, counseling, psychology, and organizational psychology. And it's enabled, this combination has enabled him to make a unique contribution to assessment methodology. Harrison Assessments was founded in 1990 and it operates in over 70 countries around the world. We're very interested to hear more about your take on employee engagement and personalizing this approach. So welcome, Dan.
Thank you.
Dr. Harrison, could you start by sharing your perspective on why employee engagement and retention have become such pressing issues in today's workplace?
Well, I think there's a really big push for retaining talent is one thing. I think engagement is a very popular concept now that people are looking for. They want people who are not just there to get a paycheck, but are there to really help the organization achieve the goals of the organization. So I think that's been now recognized as a really important aspect of employment. I think also it sets the tone for the culture in the organization. When people are engaged, it has some knock-on effect for other employees. Whereas if you have a culture of people who are not engaged, that has a destructive effect for the organization's culture. So it's a cultural issue as well as it is a productivity issue and goal achievement issue.
In your experience, what are the most common reasons behind disengagement in modern organizations?
Well, one reason is that people are in the wrong job to start with. So they don't have suitability for their job. That means that their natural behaviors, their natural tendencies are not matched with the job. Their interests are not matched with the job. They're just there to get a paycheck. And they haven't thought clearly about, what they want to do in their career and their job. And they're just taking what job seems to be available. And that in itself is a basis for disengagement right there, because they're just simply not interested in the job and it's not what they enjoy doing. So when you do the opposite and you have people who are interested in what they're doing and enjoy the tasks that they're doing, then you're much more likely to be engaged. So that's one of the key reasons. Another really important reason is that the employee doesn't feel like they're getting their goals for employment achieved. So they maybe want to earn higher pay, or they want to, advancement, or they want career development, or whatever it is. There's about 20 different things that they could want. And they're not getting it. For example, maybe they're not getting the meaning. Maybe they have a desire to help others or society, and they don't see how their work is doing that. And there's a whole bunch of interpersonal things like having your opinions valued and things like that, that if they don't feel like they're getting that, then they're going to disengage. So engagement is assuming that people are actually suitable for the job and fit the job. Then the next step is engagement is very dependent upon whether they're getting what they want out of the job. And that's certainly going to drive whether they're going to stay in the job or not. And so that's what we tend to focus on. We do screen people beforehand going into the job to see if they're actually suited for the job, they're going to enjoy the job. And second, but then after that, the real focus is on seeing what the employee's goals are and how that matches up with the organization's goals. And getting that alignment is really fundamentally the key to engagement.
And that's outside the housekeeping issues that often are thought of as employment engagement, of having the materials needed for the job and those sort of aspects.
Yeah, but part of it is, a lot of it also is that managers behave in certain ways that can make the job harder as well. And so, they need certain things like clarity, certain clarity from the manager they may not be getting. So we teach them how to get that clarity, how to take the initiative to get the clarity and get what they want out of the employment situation.
What do you think some strategies or approaches that companies have been used should be avoided? I mean, we've been doing employee engagement for 30 odd years, and we haven't seemed to move the needle too much. Why do you think that is?
Usually the approach they take, there's several assumptions that they make. One assumption is that engagement is the responsibility of the manager, when in fact engagement is an internal phenomena, and it's really only comes down to the responsibility of the individual employee. The manager can support it or they can hinder it, but engagement is something that comes from within the person. And if that's not recognized, then you're not going to make much headway on the engagement. On top of that, the engagement surveys, they're reasonably popular. They can give you a broad overview of engagement. In effect, they're really kind of a type of management feedback. Most of them, because most of it surrounds the manager, so they're kind of giving feedback about their manager. And as a result of that, it has to be anonymous because to avoid repercussions and things like that. So all the engagement surveys are anonymous. So the data can only be viewed at a group level. And then you only can use it at a group level. But the problem is you're trying to engage people on an individual level. It's an individual phenomena. So
Yes.
in order to engage them on an individual phenomena, you have to engage them individually and look at what's important to that person. Because even though there's some popular things like, once development opportunities is very popular, each employee has their own set of things that they want, that they consider to be important to them for the employment. And that's what really needs to be focused on an individual basis to be able to see it. The really interesting thing about it, though, is it doesn't have to take a lot of time and from the employer to do it. We have an app that enables the employee to sort of work through what they want from employment and how they can get it. So essentially, we do all the groundwork for the manager and save the manager a lot of time. And then on top of that, the app also interacts with the manager and then lets the manager know at key points when to enter the discussion with the employee and how to enter the discussion with the employee. So we're really prepping both sides through an app and then and then encouraging the discussion after that. So it saves a lot of time and gives people a lot of insight in how you deal with things like, in people requesting a pay increase or people wanting development opportunities. And that enables the whole process to be very effective because it's thought through very carefully from both sides, what the employee needs to do and what the manager needs to do.
Yeah, that's interesting. So this anonymous approach has meant that managers have been made responsible for engagement. They've been told there's an engagement problem, but they have no information to actually do anything about it. Which
Well, first of all, you can't be responsible for something that you can't change.
yeah,
And if the person isn't suitable for the job, you're not going to change that. I don't care how good you are as a manager. If their natural tendencies and interests are not to the job, you're just not going to change that. And if you're not meeting their goals, you're not going to have much impact. No matter how good you are as a manager, you're just not going to have that much impact. because you're not really dealing with the individual person. And so, yeah, it, it's very, very difficult to have a responsibility for something assigned to you that you can impact, but it's really ultimately not
Yeah.
something you can do yourself, because it really belongs to the person to be engaged. But there's really a lot of ways that the manager can support it, that are well beyond just the basic good management practices. The manager, how they support it is really, really important. How they respond to, pay increases, and how, requests, and how they respond to advancement, how they deal with those issues, how they deal with the issues of development opportunities for employees, is very, very important for the employee's engagement. And just understanding how you can do that much better as a manager, uh, puts you in a position, where you're able to, really drive engagement and create deals, with employees. Okay, you want this? This is what you're going to need to do it, and then we'll work on, seeing what we can do to create that for you. But essentially, you're the one that's got to create it. You know,
Yeah.
for
Well, it's mutual
example,
benefit, isn't it? It's these
yeah,
concepts of mutual benefit.
yeah. For example, a lot of employees, they want to have development opportunities. It's the most popular one. They want development opportunities, but there's a lot of issues around that. For example, what's their career goals? So in order to get them the right development opportunities, you need to know what they want to do in their career, right?
Yeah.
And they need to know what they want to do in their career. So they have to go through a process of really looking through that and working through that and identifying what they want. And then the next step is we need to identify, well, what development opportunities can help them to do that, and to help them to go in that career direction that they want. And does the organization offer that? And if it doesn't, okay, how can we do it? Maybe they get it from outside of work, or whatever. There's a lot of different ways to do it. And then, okay, once you decide on the development opportunities, how are you going to implement it? How are you going to get, ensure they got the commitment to it? How are you going to review it? So there's a lot of issues all around that, that if the manager handles well, you're going to have a lot more chance of engagement, because people are engaged by what they want, not what you want. You want them to do this goal, that goal, this goal, right? They're not engaged by that, because they're engaged by what they can get out of it and what they want out of it. But if you align your goals with what their goals are, then you get engagement from the person, because they're working on what they want, which happens to align with what you want. And that's how you get engagement.
Yeah. And we think about, I mean, this webinar is about personalizing engagement, but I guess we think about it often from the managers and the HR professionals' perspective of personalizing their approach to engagement. But from what you're saying, it's just as much about personalizing the employee's approach to how they want to be engaged.
Well, you have to personalize it. Otherwise, you're never going to get engagement. So, you'll make some tiny, tiny move, maybe, but you're not going to get people who are really excited to, support the organization's goals. Like another one, for example, is people, a lot of people want, to be able to see a path where they can earn higher pay, right? And that discussion is a fantastic discussion. And most managers shy away from that. It's like, oh, I don't know, I can offer that or whatever. But the truth is, having that discussion is extremely important, because then people, if that's what their goal is, and they're very strong on that, if they don't get it, they're going to be out, and you're going to have people, your talented people or whatever, they're going to say, okay, I'm out. And so, it's a very sensitive conversation, and the manager really needs to know how to handle that and be receptive to that, be receptive to their desire, but at the same time, turn it back around and say, well, look, this is what you're going to need to do to achieve that in this organization. And you're going to have to, do X, Y, and Z. And then we're going to get there. Now, that's how you get the person really aligned, because now they've got their goal aligned with your goal. And they're going to start jumping in and being much more engaged to do what you want to do. The bottom line is what we're saying is you have to engage employees individually in order to have them be engaged.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they're not going to be engaged. They answer a survey once a year or whatever, and nobody ever responds to the survey, and they don't know what the results were. And they want certain things. And if anything, it can be counterproductive, because they sit there and take their time to do this, but nothing comes back to them. Whether they don't see anything, it just got nothing to do with what's important to them, in most cases, right? Now, how it can help is, well, maybe the manager gets some feedback and they improve in certain areas, and that can be a plus. But there's a lot of pitfalls in that process too. Because the manager is going to feel like, well, that's, this isn't totally in my domain to be able to do that with a person. And yet I'm being graded on, being able to engage these people. And I can do so much, but I'm getting blamed if they don't do it. And the problem is, what that's going to make me do is to do things that really are not in the best interest of the company, of the organization, to try to get a favorable response from people so I can boost my own career, right? And so,
the moral hazard of that is underthought of, isn't it? But hey, I don't like this, you don't like this. Let's all just get the scores up, and then we can all just move on.
Right. It has some unintended consequences. You give me a good score, and I'll help you out. And that's really not in the best interest of the organization.
Certainly not long term. And I mean, I think ultimately this is all our data is about fostering great conversations, and using this as the entry point for the employee to do the work,
right?
And for the manager to reflect on it.
The thing is, these kind of conversations, that they don't actually eat your time, because they're things you need to do anyway. So as a manager, you need to give performance reviews and that sort of thing. Why not turn your performance review into an alignment review, where you look at what's the alignment with the individual and the organization? It takes the same amount of time. And you're able to look at, well, what they want and what's important to them, and then you can say, okay, where are we at? So in other words, we're taking the performance review and turning it into an adult conversation, instead of rating kids, rating employees as if they were kids in school or something, and you get such and such a rating or whatever. It's quite demeaning, in fact, and it ignores what the person wants. So if you're talking about performance, you should be looking at performance in both directions. How is the organization doing in being able to help the employee get what they want out of employment, and how is the employee doing to help the organization get what they want? And well, let's make a deal, which is the crux of the whole process anyway. It's a business relationship. So, but it's a type of business relationship that tends to be more long-term and deeply connected. And so, you have to then keep regenerating that relationship, and and building it such that both parties are mutually satisfied. And I just see so many organizations where people are going out the door, they're losing their talented people, and say, oh my God, Joe's quitting and he's our most talented guy. Well, if you're really doing your engagement on a personalized basis, you're going to know whether he's happy or not happy beforehand. And you're going to know, okay, well, what do I need to do to keep him? otherwise, if you're not having those conversations, he's on Glassdoor or whatever, looking at,
Yep.
well, what are his other opportunities? And you're sitting there in the dark, not knowing what the heck, Joe's thinking. And suddenly you find out, hey, he's got this other job that, is better than your job, or that hopefully will meet his goals more than yours is. But he won't even know that, honestly. But if he feels like he's not getting his goals met at your job, he's probably going to be willing to take the chance to jump and see if the other place will help him meet his goals. So it prevents all of that stuff by simply personalizing the whole process and really creating clarity about the mutual goals and how you can create alignment with the employees' goals and the organization's goals.
Yeah, that rings so many bells, particularly at the moment where there's so many clients who are just unable to replace people. I mean, they're putting ads out there, but they just can't. And the good people, of course, have the most opportunities. They're the hardest to replace.
That's right. And, if they're not getting their goals met, then you're really vulnerable for them leaving. So it's extremely important approach to make. And honestly, it doesn't really take that much more work. And in fact, what you put into it, you'll get 10 times out of it in terms of, productivity and energy from your employees. And I, for example, I have one employee. He just really, he's got a lot of, big family. He just really wants higher pay, and I lay it out for him. Okay, well, this is what you're going to have to do. And he digs in himself and researches, things that he thinks going to make a difference, and where he can give the company, more. And then I look at that and say, oh yeah, I like that one. That's really good. If you do that, yeah, I can definitely, give you a higher pay.
Yeah, well, it's a
Because
negotiation.
yeah, he's gonna bring, if he does that, he's gonna bring a lot to the table, and I'm
yeah,
gonna be able to say, yeah, well, you've earned it, and you can get it that way. Um, so, but people, they're not necessarily objective about it, right? A lot of people say, well, I need higher pay because, well, my family's bigger and I need more money. It's like, okay, it's not, I'm not your daddy, I'm not,
yeah,
I'm not here just to give you what you need. We're making a deal. So let's make a deal
yeah.
and look at, what you're going to have to do. And in organizations, most of the people, they're going to have to earn it before they get it, not get it before they earn it.
That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a fundamental truth that all successful relationships, long-term relationships, that is, have to be win-win. There's got to be mutual benefit, which I think is an idea that underpins a lot of your work. Of this mutual benefit and mutual responsibility is probably the other side of that coin, isn't it?
And the reality is that a lot of people are very unrealistic about their goals and what they want, and they want it. They're not sure how to deal with it. They're not sure how to interact with the employer. They just want it. And the problem is, reality comes home because, they've got to be able to produce whatever it is, right, they want. Like, say, for example, they want their opinions valued. Well, they better have some valuable opinions then. And they're going to have to work at, how are they presenting their opinions? How are they refining their opinions? How are they researching related to their opinions? And that's what's going to get their opinions valued. So you've got to work employees through a process of them understanding, okay, what do they need to do? And that's what we do through the app, is helping them to really establish this process. So when they go to talk to the manager about whatever it is that they want better or more, they're talking to them from a point of being ready to have it, being ready and being professional. They're talking from a point of professional relationship. I can't tell you how many times people have previously, before I established this, previously, would send me something and say, I want a raise. And, and I would say, okay, well, let's look at it, what's involved, what are you doing? And they would just simply tell me, oh, I do X, Y, and Z. I do this, this, and this. Give me a long list of, tasks and things that they do. And they're completely unprepared to ask for a raise.
Yeah.
And so then my job as a manager, I have to then dig into that. I have to either just say no, or you're not ready, which then that's going to cheese them off. Or I have to then dig into that and say, try to work out all the details. Well, what are you doing? How's it working? How is it bringing money into the company, et cetera? And that's going to take my time and effort to do that. And whereas if I have them prepared going into it, they'll prepare themselves. That's what the app does. It prepares them. So when they go to have that conversation with me, it's a completely different conversation. They've got this thing laid out that says, this is how I've helped the company make money. This is what I've done in the last few months. This is what's changed. This is how I've improved. Da da da. I don't have to dig around, try to find it, go talk to this person or that person, and worry about how to do it. It's all right in front of me, and then I can say, okay, well, that's interesting, and if I agree with it, I can then say, okay, I agree with it. I don't agree with, or I can say, okay, you're right about this, this, and this, but the reality is you're also doing this other thing that is kind of hindering your productivity. And then we could just have an honest and transparent discussion that will then lead to a result. And then I can say, well, look, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but there's in order to really get a raise, you're still going to have to do this next bar. You're still going to have to do this next thing, and then and then that will put you in a position to get a raise.
Yeah. So there's clarity around the expectations and the
all clarity.
that
They understand what it is at that point. I understand what it is, and it has a magnificent effect on people because they know somebody cares about what they want, and they know somebody's there, interacting with them in a real way. They're not just this cog in a wheel that says, well, you've got to do this, 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 and this. And it's honestly not that hard to do. It's very straightforward. And the amount of reward is, 10 times what you get, what the time that you would take, which you're going to end up spending time with people anyway, a lot of time dealing with issues of, when they're not getting what they want, they're going to act out and do lots of things that's going to take your time and, not be on target in the first place. So,
well, that's a really interesting point because there's so many people that are very uncomfortable asking for what they want, let alone a raise. So having a process for them to actually work through and prepare, I think would be massively helpful for enabling.
A lot of people have a goal for advancement. For example, they want to advance in the organization, and in a lot of cases, there can be an advancement path, and having that sort of discussion. Well, this is a possibility. Let's look at that. Let's look at what that involves. It takes a tremendous load off the person's mind because then they can look at it and say, oh, I guess I can really get what I want to do in this organization. Right. And even when you have to say, look, I can't give you that, but what I can give you is this and give you something else instead of that. That conversation is also very powerful because it gets the person to engage in the discussion. And also, if you start having those kind of conversations, you're not going to get surprised, right? You're going to say, okay, I'm not really able to give you that. But I can give you this, and they may say, well, no, I don't really want that. Well, at least that person is probably not going to stay very long. So you can then plan your recruitment or whatever you're doing to to compensate for that. Or you can then also get other people who have that job knowledge that that person has that they can take over if they leave. So you can see you can create redundancy that gives you protection.
Yeah.
Whereas if you get surprised, you can easily just have this whole area that's the only person that knew what to do with
Yeah.
that. And
Sounds
then you're
risky.
stuck. Everybody's scrambling of, what do we do now? And you got, big hits to projects and things like that. So, you know, being transparent and having everything on the table just benefits everybody. Because I'm quite happy to have a conversation with somebody and have them say, well, look, I really do want that. And I'm happy to say, well, okay, I don't think we can give it. And if is that really the most important thing for you? And you've got to have it. Is it a deal breaker for you? And they say, yes. I say, okay, well, in that case, well, let's work toward you trying to get what you want perhaps outside of the organization. And at least I know now, and I can look at some of your duties and how we can at least have some redundancy in some of your duties, so it's going to be a win-win for us as well, if you leave, rather than we're getting shocked, right? And if it but and I can say, look, I really do support you to get what you want, in your life. You've been here with us for a while, and okay, maybe you can't get what you want, but we care about you and want you to have a, good life and get what you want. And a lot that
Yeah,
just
well,
makes
that's it, isn't it? I mean, there's going to be
yeah,
opportunities that organizations can't replicate, and
and it makes all the
that's
difference
okay.
in
It's a conversation.
yeah. It makes all the difference in the world. You have those kind of conversations. People know, okay, you're real, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times, reality comes home and they might say, it's going to be very risky because I'm not sure the other organization can give me what I want either. Or
Yeah.
I've talked to a few people and they're not giving what I want, but what they're going to think is, actually, this company really cares about me.
Mm.
And this company is, really doing their best to support me. I didn't hear anybody else talking about what I wanted when I went to their
That's it. That's it. The grass is greener.
yeah, when I went to those companies, I didn't hear anybody else talking about it and asking me what's important to me. So because if you take that approach, there's not a lot of competition. You you become really an employer of choice if you take that approach, because very, very few employers are skilled enough to actually do that.
Well, that led me to my next question, Dan, which is, well, that's all good and well for you to say you're a very, very experienced organizational psychologist, but how does the ordinary manager take this approach? What's Harrison doing to facilitate that?
Well, first of all, we facilitate the employee first. And so we prepare them. So when the employee then comes to the manager, and so the employee actually initiates all of that. When the employee comes to the manager and presents what they want, the manager is prepped every time. So if they get, for example, a request for higher pay or pay increase, they get a a paragraph or so of really key points of how you should handle it. So they don't have to they don't have to remember it or think it off the top of the head. They're busy people. And so they can immediately see, oh, I see. First thing, be welcoming. Second thing, get clarity about exactly what they want. And down the list of, maybe 10 or 15 things where they can do. And what that does is it trains the manager. It starts to imprint it into the manager because they're getting trained by actually doing it. It's a much better training. So if I just give you a training, you've got to remember it all. You're not going to remember it all. You're going to remember, 10, 20% of it and struggle to implement it. But in this case, I'm integrating the training in with the request itself in a bullet form, in a very clear and succinct bullet form. that enables the manager to say, oh yeah, okay, I remember that now. The last person, I remember that. Okay, now I can do that. I can do that. Very, very simple for the manager to, operationalize real professional management without, having this training that they have to remember everything and go through that. And what that does is it imprints it over a period of time. So as they use it, it just naturally imprints it. It repeats it over and over because they're seeing it again and again, and it repeats it. And they pretty soon they don't even need it because it's all deeply ingrained in them already.
Yeah, so they get really skillful at having those conversations that matter. And how does this impact organizational culture and creating these purpose-driven cultures that we've discussed in personalizing engagement?
Well, it dramatically improves the culture to be more constructive, more productive. Everything in there basically is basically getting people to operate in a, more professional and, clear way in the relationship. So it starts to automatically just improve the relationships, improve people's understanding of how organizations work, and improve the understanding of how to go about different things in the organization. So it starts to shift the culture by really people just being truthful. I mean, if you want to really change the culture, create transparency and truthfulness about what the two parties need, and then you'll have a dramatic shift in the relationship, just like you would in any other business relationship. If you have a partnership relationship or whatever, you need to keep that clear about what's important to both parties, and allow communications to be direct and respectful and clear. And then you can have a very good partnership, or any relationship for that matter. It's based on the same principles that make any relationship work. And so employment is a relationship. And once you apply those principles, it's going to have a dramatic shift on the culture of the organization.
Yeah, I completely agree. If there was one single strategy that you'd recommend to get people started on this process, what would it be?
Well, I mean, you really just have to, turn it on and let people do it. The strategy is built into what we already have. So there's not much you have to do. All you have to do is enter the manager and the employees and let them go, and let them start having those discussions, because everybody's going to be prepped for it. And you have to then essentially announce, okay, we've got this program called Career Goals Program, and we want to know what's important to you, and we want to be able to start having those conversations, and so we can have a win-win for our employees and for the organization. And let's give it a go and see how it works. That's the strategy.
Yeah. It's an interesting one, isn't it? And that feeling that employees get when they walk out of meetings and there's clarity and they've been heard and they're pumped. I mean, there's no other way to describe it, is it? They're pumped. And I think that can be really infectious for organizations in bringing the issues to the fore and seeing that there's actually action being taken to address the concerns. I think that becomes really infectious through the organization.
And who's not going to want to do that? I mean, they're there for a reason, and it's not just to collect a paycheck. They're there for a reason because they have their own goals and their own desires, their own issues, and getting clarity on that is really your first step of being able to build a relationship.
So what are the most common leadership traits that tend to undermine employee engagement?
Well, we're actually not really looking at it that way in this process when we're talking about engagement, because I mean, there's a million things you can do. The worst thing you can do is to not address the issues. That's the worst thing, is close your eyes and not address the issues with the employee. With the employee, that's the worst thing you can do.
Employees don't like that.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, I mean, there's a million things you can do. You can be blunt, you can be evasive, you can be dogmatic, all that thing, but all of that gets sorted out when you start having conversations which you're prepped to have. And that's the beauty of it, is it naturally develops leaders as you go through the process, and whatever trait it is that they're struggling with or they would normally have difficulty with, it starts to sort it out. Like some leaders have a lot of trouble providing clarity, and leadership's a really difficult job. I mean, you've got to manage downward, you got to manage sideways, you got to manage upward. I mean, it's so difficult to do that really well. And then, so, having something to guide you through that process is really important. And leaders will also, they go through the process themselves because they're working for somebody too. And so, by them going through that process, they start to get clarity. It's like, oh, okay, now this is what's worked. There's nothing better than having a personal experience of something from your own point of view. And then it's like the light starts to go on and you see, oh, okay, this is going to be, I could do this with my employees. Gee. So, yeah, I mean, the thing with leadership, there's so many ways you can provide clarity. I mean, what do they have? They have to maintain clarity about priorities, about expectations, right? There's all these things. And if you do it right with this program, basically, the employee is going to help you to do that, right? Because if, for example, they don't have clarity about their priorities, you're going to get pinged. And you say, okay, I'm not clear. And then at least you're going to know that they're lacking clarity about their priorities, and then you can sort it out, right? Or their expectations or whatever. So what it does is just creates this clarity all the way around about employment expectations, about priorities, employee goals, organization's goals. How does that all get aligned? It itself, it generates this clarity. And that in itself is transformational for leaders to be able to, do those things. So it's going to naturally train the leaders to do essentially all the, most important leadership skills. Just automatically, it's going to train them to do it. So whatever traits they have that's a problem, most likely those traits are going to interfere with their own career progress as well. So they're going to go through that when they go through their own, and see what the problem is there. And then that'll then have a downward effect where they're able to see, okay, this is impacting my employees as well. But it's essentially giving them a little how-to manual as they go through the process of,
that's right,
leading people
and practicing it constantly themselves. And having
constant
these
practice,
great conversations.
Right. Because otherwise, you go to a leadership training or leadership seminar, people tell you this thing and that thing, but you come back and how do you apply it? And, does it cover all the bases? Almost never. And so, and you have to remember it all, and it's very, very, very difficult. So you need something that's more real practical application of how do you apply it in this instance and that instance. Usually the leadership training is very general. Yeah.
So it sounds really exciting.
Yeah.
So what's involved in HR professionals learning more about this process, and what do they need to do?
We can give them a trial of it, and let them see how it works with maybe use it in a small group to start out with, and see how people respond to it, and then from there they can expand it into their organization. The main thing is you create a mutually beneficial relationship, and starting with that intention, to do that, and that has amazing impact on whatever relationship you have. Is having the intention to have a mutually beneficial relationship and to look at the issues where it is mutually beneficial and how it can be more mutually beneficial. And if you want to improve any relationship, that's the basis which you have to go on. Whether that's your spouse relationship or your relationship with your kids or your relationship with the employer, that's a fundamental principle.
Excellent. So we're going from anonymous, opaque data to personalized clarity around expectations.
Yeah. Employees are not cogs in the wheel. They're people. They got their own desires. They got their own dreams. They got their own, issues and problems, whatever they have that they're struggling with in their life. Treating people on a personalized basis is very humanizing and brings them into a relationship that's positive. If you do this well, nobody wants to leave you. I'll tell you from experience. If you really work at this, it has an incredibly positive effect, which people want to stay with you and they want to give you their best, and they want to really work hard to make it work, and that's how they get excited and engaged with what you're doing, because it's really a relationship that makes them engaged. When you give them, when you build this mutually beneficial relationship, that's what makes people engaged.
Yeah, love that, Dan. Well, we're not cogs in a wheel; we're human beings.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time this morning,
Okay.
Dr. Dan Harrison.
Yeah, you're welcome.